This is Democracy Watch. So, Mark, the Republicans have just unveiled a dangerous new legal strategy in a crucial swing state, which you wrote a piece about in DemocracyDocket. For those watching, like Mark and I have spoken about a lot of different dangerous strategies. There are a few that he's sounded the alarm about as seriously as this one. So, Mark, can you explain what happened here in Arizona?
Yeah, look, I think this is arguably the biggest threat to democracy we see right now in the country, okay, as we record this. And that is with all of the Trump stuff going on in the various courtrooms. Arizona has a law that says every 2 years, the Secretary of State has to publish an election procedure manual. Think of this as the granular way in which elections are held in Arizona. And that document got published on December 30th. And in a coordinated strike, 3 different conservative and Republican organizations, including the Republican Party, filed lawsuits over a 10-day period to try to eviscerate and, in fact, overturn in its entirety this document. It is not the equivalent of attacking a state's speed limit. It is literally an effort to rip up all the street signs. It is a very, very dangerous thing. If they're able to pull this off, what we will see in Arizona in 2024 will be a very different looking election.
All right, so tell us about these election manuals. Who are they for? Who makes them? And have we seen fights over them in the past?
So they're not usually something you fight over.
Right.
I mean,
and that's how it's been working with all, like, none of this stuff is what you usually fight over. It's just everything is a new frontier now.
Correct. I mean, the mission of the election procedure manual in Arizona is to, quote, achieve and maintain the maximum degree of correctness, impartiality, uniformity, and efficiency. Like, it's literally, this is how you open the polls. This is the equipment you have in the room. This is how you store the equipment. It's a very, very matter-of-fact document about how election officials are to conduct elections efficiently, fairly, and uniformly. And by the way, Republicans are the ones usually complaining that there's not uniformity of election administration, right? Remember Rudy Giuliani talking about how Philadelphia was different than everybody else? Arizona says, we're going to make the Secretary of State enact this manual or promulgate this manual. It's going to be subject to public comment. It's going to be subject to public review. It's going to have to be signed off by the Attorney General, by the governor. And it's usually not that controversial. It is very controversial now because Republicans want to undermine the rules of the road. They want to undermine the way in which state election officials have to do their job so that bad actors can do their deeds unpunished and they can sow chaos along the way.
What do you think the likelihood of success is for these 3 different groups who are bringing these lawsuits forward?
Yeah, so it's hopefully small. Hopefully we will be, my law firm, my team are intervening in those cases to defend, to try to fight these back. But just to give you some sense of the scope here, they are not only looking in one breath to throw out the entire manual. Here are some of the specifics that they want to target. They want to allow obstruction and harassment of voters dropping off ballots at drop boxes. Okay, there's a provision of the manual that says local election officials have to make sure that voters can vote without obstruction or harassment. They are saying, no, you should be able to obstruct and harass. There is a provision of the manual that empowers counties to prevent intimidation conducted inside the polling location. They're suing to say that's not okay, that there should be allowed to be intimidation inside the polling location. So they're trying to strike down provisions that make it easier to register, make it limit the ability to challenge voters. It is literally from registration to vote counting that the Republicans are targeting here. So I am hopeful that the courts will once again step up and do their duty. We've seen before the courts step in exactly these circumstances. But I wanted to sound this alarm because it's a very dangerous time for democracy in Arizona.
And what are the implications if this succeeds in Arizona nationwide?
Oh, I think if it succeeds in Arizona, you're going to see this cookie cutter around the country, right? I mean, if they're able to convince judges in Arizona that there does not need to be uniformity, efficiency, and correctness, and that provisions that protect voters from harassment and intimidation are somehow out of bounds for the state to regulate. That you should be allowed to do that. That uniform counting standards, forcing MAGA Republican election deniers to do their job at the local election offices. That if they're able to achieve that in Arizona, I think you know what's going to happen. I think everyone listening to this and watching this knows what's going to happen. It's what the Republicans want. They want to sow chaos and discord. They want to allow there to be harassment and election vigilantism around the country.
Now, you had mentioned that your firm is intervening, first of all, for anybody watching to support Marc and his team in the invaluable work that they're doing right now, like in Arizona. The best way to support them from our end is to sign up for DemocracyDocket. It's the free news outlet Marc founded to focus on everything voting and elections. I'll put the link on the screen and also in the post description of this video. It's an amazing resource. But Marc, what does your firm's intervention look like here? What are we looking at?
Yeah, so we have clients who have been engaged in litigation to expand voting rights, and also clients who have members who are themselves Arizona voters who face the real risk of disenfranchisement if this manual is repealed. So we're representing them in intervening. And what that means is that, when Republicans sue the state of Arizona or Maricopa County, obviously it's a lawsuit between those two parties. There's the right of interested parties who have a legal stake in it, to join the lawsuit. So normally people intervene to join as plaintiffs. We are literally rushing into the fire. Our clients are rushing into the fire to try to put the fire out. Like we're saying, if you're suing the state, you're suing us. We are also defendants because we are standing up for the right to vote. And so I have a lot of respect for our clients who are willing to do this, and obviously for the lawyers who represent them.
You've been warning about this exact thing for years now, pretty much alone. Why is this strategy of attacking the election infrastructure at such a granular level so pernicious?
It's pernicious because honestly, the mainstream media, other than you, and I don't mean that, just because I'm talking to you, but like the mainstream media, they want to talk about all these high level issues. What's happening at the national level? What's the latest in Donald Trump's indictments? And I'm not saying that's not important. We've talked about that. You've talked about it in other segments. Those are important things. But what Republicans have realized is that they can target the way in which election officials do their job, whose ballot gets counted, whose vote doesn't get recorded, who is not allowed to register. These very, very sort of localized issues that on an individual level, the mainstream media is not interested in. They're not interested in whether one county or another county, how they count ballots. It's not their wheelhouse. But I'm here to tell you that if you want to know what's going to cause voters to be able to vote, what is going to affect the outcome of elections, it is not these big national issues. It is the culmination of thousands and thousands of local decisions made by election workers and local election officials. That's not to say that national issues don't matter. Of course, making sure that candidates campaign on national issues is important. Making sure that the public understands that Donald Trump is a criminal is important. But I wish, other than you, there were more people focused on what is happening at this local level, not in New York TV studios, not in Washington, D.C. law firms, not in L.A. and San Francisco, all wonderful places I love, but what is happening in these local election officials in places like Cochise County, Arizona.
Yeah. Yeah, and they also have a lot of experience being very patient and seeing out these plans at local levels for over the course of years. I mean, you and I have spoken privately about Project Red Map, which came about after Obama's victory in 2008, and so in 2010 they really invested in these local level, state level legislatures, and look how it bared itself out in the coming years. I mean, Republicans were able to flip, I think it was somewhere in the ballpark of 700 state legislatures, and just the consequences of that have been incalculable.
Yeah, and another example, which is something you and I have talked about, is the attack on private right of actions. We've talked about this extensively, and again, this is something the mainstream media does not focus on. I don't mean to villainize the mainstream media, in some conspiracy way, but Republicans have been trying to strip the court's ability to review their state legislative actions, their maps, their laws, because Republicans want the freedom to be able to discriminate against voters, racially profile, engage in racial discrimination in drawing districts. And so they have been floating this idea of defanging litigation to hold them accountable by saying private parties can't bring that litigation, only the Department of Justice can. And they've been doing that. They've been plotting that for years. And then all of a sudden what happens is one day it pops in the Eighth Circuit and people at the national level are like, oh my God, look at this. Although even now, as you and I have talked, it's happening in other places and the media is again sort of not paying attention.
Yeah. Mark, let's finish off with this. It feels like we are contending with like an onslaught against every inch of our election infrastructure. At this point, they're now even attacking the manuals. So is there any way to definitively protect that infrastructure so that we're not just kind of taking incoming fire on a daily basis and just kind of struggling just to keep our heads above water?
Yeah, Congress needs to pass voting rights, comprehensive voting rights legislation. When you and I talked about the need to pass the Freedom to Vote Act, we were not saying that because we were cheerleaders for Democrats in Congress. I mean, we could be cheerleaders for any number of bills that Democrats pass, that Joe Biden sponsored, that made the American people's lives better. But the reason why so many of us focused on the Freedom to Vote Act, the For the People Act, the John R. Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act, is because our democracy is under attack. Donald Trump and the Republicans are exploiting every loophole they can to attack our democracy. They are weaponizing the courts. They are weaponizing the state legislatures. They are trying to, in this case, rip up the manuals that literally local election officials use to conduct free and fair elections. And the only way that we are going to be able to fight that back systematically, sure, we can celebrate the successes we have in states like Michigan when Democrats take control and pass meaningful voting rights legislation. But the only way to solve this is to solve it on a national level. And that's why when Speaker Jeffries gets that gavel in January of 2025, when Senator Schumer is once again elected to be the majority leader of the US Senate in 2025, and when President Biden steps off that podium on January 20th on the outside of the Capitol and goes inside, I know that they will be committed to once again advancing the Freedom to Vote Act, the John R. Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act, and it will be incumbent upon all of us, everyone listening to this, everyone who cares about democracy, everyone who will be part of this coalition that is moving forward towards November. It'll be incumbent on all of us to push this much needed legislation across the finish line so that I can stop having to ring this alarm and you can go on covering the other many important issues facing our country.
All right, well, that seems like the perfect place to leave off. Obviously, for those watching right now, it does not escape us the magnitude of the important work that Mark and his team are doing right now, being one of the only firms out there who are actually sounding the alarms about this massively consequential issue. So again, to support Mark and his team, the best way to do so is to sign up for Democracy Docket. Put the link right here on the screen and also in the post description of this video. I'm Brian Tyler Cohen.
I'm Marc Elias.
This is Democracy Watch.